Hello, and welcome to Xtalks Spotlight, illuminating insights from subject matter experts and industry thought leaders. I'm Sonia Hunt. In this episode, we're asking the question, how can you achieve your clinical trial objectives faster, given the uptick in clinical trial complexity? With more, here is Vera Kovacevic.
Thanks, Sonia. Getting a drug to market used to be a relatively simple and straightforward affair. That's just not the case anymore. Whether we're talking about a treatment for a chronic ambulatory condition, or precision medicine, or cell and gene therapy, there is a massive uptick in complexity. Most Phase 2 and Phase 3 studies have around 20 endpoints and 263 procedures per patient. This equates to millions of data points that a single study can generate and 3 times more data than just 10 years ago. With the exponential rise in technology and capability, these numbers are only going to go up. Not only is this more burdensome for patients and sites to recruit patients, but it increases the complexity of the logistics in sample handling for trials, since samples comprise the majority of data for any submission. In this Xtalks Spotlight edition, our featured guest speaker will discuss the unique challenges sponsors face today and solutions that will make it easier for sponsors to achieve clinical trial objectives faster. We're delighted to have Cindy Markham, Chief Commercial Officer at LabConnect, speak on current clinical trial challenges and how to overcome these obstacles to speed up your trials and connect medicines to patients around the world faster.
Thank you, Vera. I'm delighted to be here.
Cindy, can you first tell me the criteria that sponsors consider when choosing a lab?
Absolutely. And interestingly, I've been in the clinical research industry for about 30 years and worked in many different areas in helping to get critical medicines to patients. And one thing that I have seen over my lifetime is exactly what you articulated in your opening, which is the fact that there is definitely an increase in the complexity of clinical trials. However, that said, the criteria for choosing a provider in the lab space remains fairly consistent over the last 30 years. Number one, it's who will be managing the trial, so the project manager. Second is, and third, are really key components of what a lab capabilities are. And first is sample management and traceability is something that clients look for. And then as well, do we do the testing? Do we give them access to the testing? And do we provide the testing results on time? As I explored and thought about what's important to our customers, I actually also looked up some data and this data, these top 3 criteria, are from the Industry Standard Research Report from 2021.
Now, considering what you just mentioned, let's pivot to some of the obstacles. What are some challenges labs face today?
As I think about challenges that we face today, I really think about that on an industry level. So first, making sure that with this increased complexity that we don't make our trials overly burdensome to sites or patients is very important. Secondly, with that increase in complexity, it's being able to offer testing that matches with a particular protocol to generate the evidence that we need for approval. And then third, whether it's geopolitical reasons or things that come up from a natural disaster point of view, it's actually the ability to do the logistics and get the samples to where they need to be so that they can be analyzed and reported on. And so as I think about those challenges and customers are thinking about their lab provider, they're going to want to look at labs that have the needed footprint to overcome these challenges. And interestingly, the LabConnect model, which is geographically dispersed, really hits home on being able to not only offer access to testing, but also that geographic footprint to help avoid or work around some of these things that come up naturally.
With the increase in complex clinical trials, such as cell and gene therapy and rare disease, what are some steps sponsors can take to decrease time without losing sample integrity?
Thank you for that question, Vera. And certainly in cell and gene therapy and rare disease, these are some of the most complex trials that we all manage. And so thinking about the samples that we collect, those are even more precious because they're harder to come by. I think it's important as a sponsor chooses a lab to really think about choosing a lab that takes a more consultative approach, especially with these complex trials. We have to navigate not only the disease itself, but getting the samples from the patients, and then also balancing that with generating the right evidence to gain approval for these critical life-changing therapies for patients. So there's that piece, the lab partner who can help to marry the testing with the science, with the lab strategy for the protocol. But then as well, from a capabilities perspective, it's harder to find and reach these patients, which means that having a capability around decentralizing the lab offering is also something important. For example, at LabConnect, with our geographically dispersed model, it naturally lends itself to a decentralized approach. And as we overlay an offering in home healthcare, as well as ability to use mobile units to reach patients, and possibly with microsampling and testing, it really enhances and creates some depth from a decentralized trial approach and perspective.
On a similar note, sometimes trials demand a more precise chain of custody. What works best for this?
You bring up a really important industry challenge. Every sample is precious. When we think about the data that's going to be submitted to get a drug approved, about 70% or more of that is lab data. And that's how we show efficacy and safety for a particular product. And with that, loss of samples is a big focus in industry, because when you lose a sample, you lose that important data that's going to demonstrate that efficacy and safety of the product under study. And so with that, what's important in terms of chain of custody is a partner who can offer different levels of sample tracking. So it's expected that a lab is going to be able to track samples and that samples will not get lost. But there are certain times when the viability of the sample is short, and it's going to be extra important, or it's an efficacy sample, it's going to be extra important to do an enhanced tracking. And typically you want to also look for some enabling technologies that help with that. We offer a digital pen. We can also do scanning to track the samples, but importantly, it's also the service behind that makes sure that no samples are lost. And then for customers that have a very large portfolio, something else to consider would be having a biospecimen manager on the team. We often expect that our clinical project managers are also experts at managing lab samples, but in fact, they're not. So even though we expect them to do that job, it becomes much more important to have an expert who can actually track specimens as part of a clinical trial. And again, we're fortunate at LabConnect to be able to offer that as well through our functional service provider offering.
When you consider how rigorous and specialized clinical trials have become around the world, how do you ensure your samples will get prepped and analyzed in time in order to keep your trials on track?
Thank you for that question, Vera. Something that's really important, there are certain samples that have less time and viability, and we need to get them processed locally. And with that, some examples would be flow cytometry, PBMC processing, and as well RNA and DNA extraction. And for these type of samples, a client or a sponsor may want to think about going to a lab partner that has a well-established network around the world. It can be costly and timely and challenging to set up such a network for a client, but a lab, that already has that set up makes that much easier for a client to take advantage of that. Secondly, because we are constantly going into new geographies for this type of service offering, having a strategy where your lab partner works in a strategic way with a specific courier can be important. This way, this courier can help you plan for new geographies and also work around any challenges that come up unexpectedly. LabConnect does this, has a strategic alliance with UPS Marken, and they've helped us do this on numerous occasions.
And of course, there's the possibility of unexpected challenges. How can sponsors plan for the unexpected?
That's a great question because having been in this industry for over 30 years, I can tell you every single trial that I've worked on, whether it's in the clinical space or the lab space, has had an unexpected challenge. What's important in the lab space is to educate yourself on the capabilities of the lab, but more importantly, the journey that the sample follows as it flows through the lab. And let me give you an example, and I'm going to stop really early in the process. But as a lab is selected and we're getting ready to launch a clinical trial, we put specifications together. Those specifications tell us how the kits are going to be built. We order the supplies to build the kits, and then we build the kits and we send those to the sites. Now, if you can imagine, I'm going to stop right there, because if you can imagine, there's a site that's receiving that kit and they've got 30 studies that are ongoing, and each of those 30 studies has a thick lab manual and a bag of tubes that goes along with that. It can be very challenging for that site to figure out the order of the draw, which protocol it's for, cumbersome to pull all that together. But if we think about offering a solution where the kit is customized and it's pre-labeled and in the order of the draw, which is what LabConnect does, makes it easy to grab and go and reduces the potential for error.
Thank you very much, Cindy, for speaking with us today.
Thank you as well. I've really enjoyed the time.
We look forward to learning more about LabConnect's work. Thank you all for joining us for this Xtalks Spotlight edition. We hope you enjoyed the discussion.